You ever been in a spot where you find yourself in a hand where either you've raised or you've called a raise or whatever it is, and your opponent checks or you're first to act and you're thinking, I don't know whether to bet with this hand? Well, I'm here to hopefully show you that there's a way to have a much better intuitive approach to how to figure out which hands are better for doing certain options. Hello, welcome to the video. I'm going to be using ODIN. It's a solver where they've ran all of the situations already, and then it just loads much faster than a solver would because it doesn't have to figure it out. It just has all of the solved information already, so it's just going to give us access to what we want instantly, which is quite important. Well, there's like a 20-second delay, so you can't use it in game, of course. Here you can see we're looking at post flop, we're looking at 100 big blinds deep, and I'm going to do button versus big blind because this is quite a common situation. I'm going to show you what I think is one of the best ways to study a spot, any spot. I've picked a random one. I think it's quite common. Button versus big blind, 100 bigs deep. 974 rainbow is like just a random board that came into my head. You can obviously use whichever board, whichever situation you want for what I'm about to show you. While it loads, it takes 20 seconds. You can just see the range that it has both players having. So this might be interesting to look at for you. Like, are you raising on the button with 5-3 suited? Are you sometimes raising with Jack-2 suited? Are you always raising with 10-3 suited? Because this is what a solver would do. That doesn't mean obviously you should play exactly like a solver necessarily, but it's nice to know that these are hands that you can raise on the button. And this is the big blind's response. So obviously it doesn't have a pocket aces because that's going to go into a free bet, and we're just looking at a single raise pot. It doesn't have 5-4 suited because that's a hand that it will actually free bet every time. It doesn't always have king-6 suited because it free bets that about half the time. So the ranges we're going to be looking at are the pre-solved ranges. So first thing you'll see, the big blind checks 100% of the time, which makes sense on this board to me. You're going to free bet with pocket nines, pocket aces, loads of like really strong hands that you just don't have in your range, so it's better just to check with your full range. Makes sense. But now, immediately when we look at what we're supposed to do as a response as the button, you can see it's extremely complicated. So one, there's 4 different bet sizes, well, 3 different bet sizes in check, and you'll notice that every hand looks like it wants to do something sometimes. So except for like pocket 2s, which looks like it always wants to check, or like ace-8 suited looks like it, or even then it changes by the suit. There is like really small frequencies with pretty much everything. Like you can get an idea of which hands might want to do something more, but if you look at like pocket 9s, like which bet size do you want to choose, or when do you want to check, why do you want to check? So the first thing I like to do with this information is round all the strategies to the closest 25%. So this just makes the numbers a bit nicer. For example, if we click on ace king offsuit, it's rounded everything to the nearest 25%. So instead of having like a really low frequency some things, it's just going to tell me, okay, 1/4 of the time bet 2.1 big blinds, which is a third pot, and 75% of the time check. So this is a nice way to simplify strategy for a start. I also like to hide strategies that are less than 5%. Just because I don't really care. If a solver does something less than 5% of the time, I'm not even going to try and figure it out. This is the study tool that I wanted to show to people that I think is really interesting and really nice to use. So as the button, how do we want to figure out what to do? Well, you look at this and you think, okay, like obviously I want to bet with 10s to aces. It looks like I want to probably bet with queen 10 suited, and you can look at your suits like, oh, queen 10 of hearts, like no battle flush draws, I want to bet more. Like you can sit there looking at every hand and it's kind of hard to make sense of it. Or you can use this really interesting tool called compare EV. So if I click on check and 2.1 big blinds, it's now going to look at the whole range of hands that I've got, and it's going to compare directly the EV it would make if it checks and the EV it would make if it bets 2.1 big blinds. And as you can see here, suddenly now almost every hand in the range is this color, and that means essentially we don't care. We can bet 2.1 big blinds or we can check, and it's going to make about the same. Like if you click on aces, see, it's pretty much the same if you bet this third part or you check. If you click on 6s, like all of this, everything that's this color means that it's a really negligible difference. Some of them might slightly favor bet, some of them might slightly favor check, but the difference is such that we really don't care. So now I want to check these other hands that are different colors. So let's look at pocket 4s. Well, suddenly this hand does prefer to bet. It makes a lot more EV by betting, which makes sense. It's a settle, you want to start building the pot, you want to give your opponent the chance to check raise. It's quite intuitive, but you can see clearly that this is a hand that really does not want to check, as opposed to like pocket 5s, which doesn't care. So let's look at the other hands which have different colors, pocket 7s. Interesting, it already changes by the suit. So it does look like every combo of pocket 7s prefers to bet, which again makes sense, it's a set. It doesn't block top pair. So already we can start to look at like why, like there's different properties, it's not just pocket 7s, it's 7 of spades, 7 of hearts, and we can start to think about the properties of why this pocket 7s, although we don't need to go too deep into that right now. And then let's look at 9-7 suited. So your 9-7 of hearts is a lot more indifferent. It's this red color, but it slightly prefers bet. And the 9-7 of spades, it much prefers bet. And then the last hands, ace-9, makes sense. Much prefers a bet with all suits there. Ace-9 suited, same. And then all of your overpairs, pocket tens, pocket jacks, pocket queens, pocket kings. Already my brain is going, I don't want to check my range here because all of these hands really want to bet. And I know that's obvious, but in some spots it's not necessarily so obvious. I can see that, oh, aces actually doesn't mind checking. So if I want to strengthen my check range, this is one of the first hands that I might go to. Or pocket nines. Pocket nines really doesn't care about betting. It doesn't need the protection. It blocks top pair. It makes sense. And you can obviously use your own intuition to try and figure out why the hands want to do what and then apply it to other hands. Like if this was an 8-7-4 rainbow, it might be different because there's a straight, but if it's another 8 or 9 high rainbow board where there's not a straight, maybe there's a lot of similar patterns we can use. Or interestingly, a hand like 10-8 suited, it doesn't care to bet or check even though it's 10 high with an open ender, and maybe we get them to fold some hands that dominate us, or we get to barrel. Like it would make sense to me that this hand could be a good bet as well, but I'm seeing that it doesn't mind checking back, which is quite interesting. Okay, so next I want to compare the next bet size. So the only bet size it's given us is 33, 75, and 150. If you look at a different spot, it might give you a different bet sizes, but the solver gives us what it gives us. Already I can see that it's checking 42%, so it seems like it is important to potentially have checks, but there isn't a hand that stands out that wants to check a lot more. So even though the solver checks 42% of the time, all of these hands that are different colors, which are telling us that it cares a little bit about what we do, none of them prefer check. They all prefer bet, so there isn't. You'll see when I look at the other bet sizes, it would flag a hand as a different color if it really preferred check. And obviously, like if you look at this Queen 5, it does prefer check very slightly, but it's pretty indifferent. So if you just want to go ahead and bet your entire range of hands here, that's completely fine. If you want to try and build a strategy where you have checks as well, that's also fine, and you can kind of pull that from all of these hands. It seems like it is very criminal to start checking with pocket tens to kings, ace nine, your pocket fours, etc. So as long as you know that these are the hands you never check, and then if you want to build a check strategy, like you can throw aces in there, you can throw 10-8 suited in there, you can throw pocket nines in there is a really good one to like bolster the strength, and you can kind of figure it out from there, figure out how you want to play your strategy. No one else is going to know the hands you put in there, or you can just bet your whole range, which I think is good against most players because players probably won't check raise enough, which we can get into when we see what our opponent does. But I'm just quickly going to show you the other two bet sizes. So let's compare 1/3 to 75% and see if there's a hand that really prefers the bigger bet. So already like ace 9 doesn't care between betting the third and betting big. That's nice to know. All your overpairs. Pocket tens is the first one where it seems to start to really prefer this bigger size, which makes sense. It's an overpair. It's the most vulnerable overpair. It wants to get loads of value now before an overcard comes. Interestingly, 10-4 of hearts is one that prefers the smaller size. That's kind of random, I guess, because it's like a weak 4 with no. I mean, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, why this hand, but it's interesting to see. Your pocket sixes, it prefers the smaller size. Your pocket fives prefers the smaller size. Pocket threes prefers the smaller size. Pocket twos prefers the smaller size. 5-4 suited, smaller size. 6. So already there's only one hand that prefers the bigger size here. Let's quickly see 10-7. Yeah, and there's random 10-7 prefers small. So already we can see that the only hand that prefers the bigger size is pocket tens. So if you're constructing a bigger bet size on this board of 75%, we haven't looked at the overbets yet. Pocket tens is the only hand that you're kind of benefiting from doing that. So already I think we can completely discard this bet size. We can already say either let's bet a third with range, let's have like a mix of bet a third and check, or let's now explore the overbet and see if that's worth something that we should have in the strategy. Because it might be quite complicated to implement. So which is much better to overbet as opposed to big bet. Okay, so pocket nines really prefers the smaller bet size, which I think is quite obvious. You don't want to start overbetting top set on a dry board when you block everything. You're just going to lose loads of value. 10-7 prefers the smaller size. Pocket eights prefers the smaller size. 8-7 off prefers the smaller size. Sixes, yeah. Fives, yeah. Pocket fours. Does this prefer bigger? Oh, interesting. Okay, so pocket four seems to be the first hand that prefers the overbet. If I'm not mistaken, quickly check these again. Yeah, so pocket fours is your first hand that's going to benefit from overbet, but already it's pretty small benefit. It's 0.09 big blinds, and I know this is like it's a good amount to win if you want to employ this type of strategy, but it's not a massive deal if we just never want to overbet. If this is the first reason that we're overbetting. Pocket threes prefer smaller. Pocket twos always prefers smaller. 5-4 suited, yeah. So even the pocket tens, which like the bigger size, already, okay, it very marginally prefers the overbet as well, but it's close to neutral. The fours is the only one that's changed color, so it's the only one that's got a significant enough difference that it's changed color with the overbet. Yeah, 10-7 suited, Jack 7 suited, Queen 7 suited, yeah, Queen 4 suited, yeah. So there's one hand which is flagged here that prefers the bigger bet size. We just don't need to do it. I mean, in terms of a fundamental theory, if we want to exploit players and we think that we can overbet, we need to employ a perfect strategy because we're against their egg, we want to be really super balanced, like maybe, but you got to get to such a high level before that's relevant. If we want to start overbetting with pocket fours exclusively against someone that's bad because we think they're going to call too much, go ahead. Like just overbet ace 9 and 10s as well, why not? I reckon ace 9 will be close to indifferent too. Yeah, like this, yeah, ace 9, your pocket 10. So the hands that flagged up as immediately wanting to bet more are obviously not going to necessarily mind as much the bigger size, except for the ones that kind of like your pocket 9s. It makes sense to me that one doesn't want to overbet. Ace 9 and pocket 10s, it makes sense that one is slightly favored to the overbet. Pocket 4s, I'm not entirely sure why, because to me it seems I guess it doesn't block your second and top pair hand, so it's just going to start cooling people now. I genuinely think we can happily never overbet this spot, and it's not going to be too important. Let's quickly just compare overbet to check. Let's see what that does. Yeah, we'll see the hands that really want to bet now. But yeah, ace 9 is going to prefer overbet to check, which goes to show that it is really important to bet with it. But if we compare the overbet to a third, you'll see that it doesn't care too much about the size as well. Pocket kings is going to prefer overbet to check, but it's still going to be happy to bet 1/3. It doesn't need to overbet, as we just saw. It wasn't flagged as one that prefers overbet over 75%. It wasn't even one that preferred the bigger size necessarily. What I'm learning from this is this 75% bet, this 150% bet is situated entirely around pocket 10s for the 75% bet, pocket 4s for the overbet, and there's some hands that don't mind it. It just doesn't really matter. And if we quickly just go back to a third or check, there's a lot more hands that want to choose that are benefiting from this as opposed to check, so we don't want to check range. I genuinely think you can just bet a third with range. I mean, you can go through all these and see, like, all of these are very marginally preferring check. Give or take like 0.01 or 0.02 big blinds. But if you just want to bet with all of them, I think that's a really nice way to simplify this spot. Bet everything for 1/3, and then we can go on to our opponent's decision. So let's say that we bet a third, and obviously at this point we are playing as the solver, so we're only going to have 14.3% of our range left, which is important to remember, and I'll get on to why that's going to be more important later. This is how you're supposed to respond as the big blind versus 1/3. We can see we've got 31% folds, 52% calls, 10% this raise size, and 7% this raise size. So again, same approach. I just want to see which hands really want to fold, which hands really want to call, which hands really want to raise, and does it matter if I only have one raise size? Just quickly going back to comparing a third versus check it, you can just go through each hand individually and see which ones, if you want to have a check, you can pull from obviously the ones which are the best checks, like maybe it's some 4x, maybe you want to throw a bit of everything, like look at the best checks as a 9, as a 4, as a 7, and make like a really complicated strategy if that's what you want to do. And see by suits, like your 10-5 of hearts favors check, as opposed to the 10-5 suited with backdoors. Makes sense. More equity in the hand, we're happy to make the pot bigger. Less interactions with hands that are going to fold. They might fold 10x of heart hands, but they're not going to fold like a 10x of spades with a backdoor necessarily. Jack 3 suited, yeah, like this Jack 3 hearts prefers check a lot more, but again, super negligible difference. Now if we're going to move to our opponent. So if I compare call to raise, it's going to show me immediately which hands prefer what by a lot. But one thing you have to be careful of when using this though is sometimes the red color might be there to show you that it's not like necessarily a flag, but it can mean that it's still losing EV to do something if they play the perfect solver strategy. If we take Jack 6 off here, like it flags yellow and it looks like it prefers raise to call, which it does, but it actually prefers fold to both of them. So it's just important to look at the actual EV, and if it's negative, like more than negative 0.05, let's say, then it's not going to be a good thing to do that. Your Ace Jack clearly prefers call over raise. Your Ace 9 clearly prefers raise over call, although mostly with the Ace 9 of spades. Your Ace 8 suited again really prefers call, and just checking these EV. Your Ace 8 of spades is the one that's worth the most. The Ace 8 of hearts is not worth that much to call the flop with. Your Ace 8 of spades is worth a lot. So it's really nice to see these different numbers and think about where you were intuitively with these hands, like where you continuing with these hands. Your Ace 6, like your spades seem to make the most on this board, which is interesting. Like it's the bottom card that's a spade. I wonder how I wonder why that is. Your 8-6 suited prefers to raise. So this is one of the first things that's interesting to me. So when I have even 8-6 without, I mean the 8-6 without the backdoor seems to be quite indifferent, but your A6 of backdoor flush draw prefers to raise. So let's check the 8-6 offsuit. Yeah, again, these are indifferent. So when you've got 8-6 suited here, you know straight away this is a really good check raise as a bluff, as opposed to, I don't know, 8-5 suited, which is also a straight draw. Doesn't seem to care. And now with the 8-5, it very marginally prefers without the backdoor, which is, I mean, they're all pretty indifferent anyway, so it doesn't really matter. 6-5 suited, which is an open ender, prefers to raise with the backdoor. So if we check Jack 10 off as well, this seems quite neutral, but it's slightly on the side of raise. Jack 10 suited with backdoors, again, slightly more in favor. I imagine all your 9x is similar story. Yeah, it's very marginally happier to raise, but it's, again, like super on the fence. 10-8 suited, this is an interesting one. It seems to prefer to raise. This one prefers having the wraparound to the straight flush the most as well, which, again, seems quite intuitive. Let's quickly look at some of these hands. So yeah, like, this is one thing that's important to note. Interestingly, you can just check call with King 2 of spades, even though this is against someone that's not betting range and like break even. It's pretty mind blowing. And your King 2 of hearts, like the King 2 without backdoor, is just losing. It slightly prefers call than raise, but it's losing either way, so you'd never continue with King 2 of hearts. Yeah, and all this hands, same story. It's a losing either way, so it doesn't matter that it prefers call or raise because we're going to fold it. So let's quickly compare the big raise size to the other bets to the other raise. Oh, this is a lot of color. So I imagine most of this is because most hands are going to prefer the small size just because they're actually going to prefer fold. But it would be... actually, let's look at this first, just to see if anything really prefers the bigger size. Is there one hand that really is driving this bigger size? So I'm already thinking, why does this size exist? Because there is no standout hand here that seems to prefer the bigger size, that seems to make more by going the bigger size. So why do we ever need to do it? Literally no hand prefers to make it 75% pot as opposed to 40% pot here when we play the check raise. What's the hand that might be most intuitive? Like our ace 9. Yeah, so even at ace 9, which is the one that it's putting at the bottom here with the ace 9 spades, it's break even between both sizes. So we just completely throw this size out. Just don't do this size. We just don't need it. Like sure, like raise the hands, but just put them into this size. Quickly, let's just finally compare fold to call again. If there's any hand where you were like, oh, should I have called? Like, I don't know, maybe you have ace 3 of spades here. You might think, you know, I've got 3 to a straight flush, 3 to a wheel. He's maybe c-betting range, so my ace side could be good. I probably want to call, but do I want to raise? Is it better to raise because my hand isn't that strong? Start making him fold some better ace highs and start getting to barrel and make him fold. Start taking the aggression. Let's have a look. You can see clearly that call is better than fold with all the backdoors, but then as soon as it's ace 3 of hearts, your call is losing money. Fold is much better. So let's quickly look at this hand in raise compared to call. Ace 3 of spades. Reverse call, reverse call, reverse call, reverse call. Yeah, so it doesn't care to raise this hand. So if you want to construct a raising range and you think that you want to throw some hands in, then you probably want to see the ones that you want to use the ones that slightly clinch it as a raise, or you can just kind of, given that the equities are so close together, you can kind of pick from where you want. Like it isn't a big mistake. You can see here if you have king 8 of spades, like it's neutral between raise and call. So if you're thinking you want to have a raise range situated around this like 8-6 suited hands like that, and like ace 9, and you're thinking you want to have some more bluffs and you want to raise with some more hands and apply some more aggression because you think your opponent's c-betting too much, well, we know that this hand doesn't mind doing either. So just pick the ones that are neutral, or pick the ones that are like 0.01 big blinds in the favor of one decision instead. And like your queen 8 of spades too doesn't mind either way. Just don't fold, call or raise, do whatever. So your options are all there, and it's just so easy to see what the best decision to make is here. I'll go back to call fold. Obviously never fold a pair. You're never going to look at any pair here and see that it doesn't mean more by calling. And actually most hands with just backdoors never want to fold either. Queen jack offsuit, even that prefers call. Oh, this has been quite insightful. I'm using this as a tool right now, so if I approach a spot, I want to check my logic with a hand, then I'll just look at all these different color codes, think about the hand that I've got, see is there something that it much prefers, like can I simplify this even further by never raising, can I simplify this by only raising, etc. What do I think my opponent's doing? Is my opponent c-betting the whole range? Okay, how do I want to respond to that? Well, I know if we quickly go back to here, if I know that they're in this solver approach, we're gonna take on these overbets at 75% too. So we know we're betting everything minus check in solver world. So we're supposed to bet with about 58% of hands, but people in reality bet their full range. What can I do to exploit that? Well, I can look at all of these hands that when my opponent bets can raise, and instead of doing it sometimes, I can just do it every time, especially if it's a bluff and I think they're doing it too much, so I'm going to get more fold equity. So if I look at here at Queen 6 suited, and I see that it's indifferent between the raise size, but all the Queen 6 suiteds are the ones that the solver is choosing to raise, well, I'll just always raise Queen 6 suited with backdoor here, because I think my opponent's c-betting the range, and these are the little ways that you get to just exploit people. Or 10-6 suited. 10-6 of diamonds, for example, here might be one I just choose to always have. Or your 6-5, like it's doing it half the time, but I can just always have every 6-5 here, if I wanted to as an exploit. Use this information as you will, like you can play around with this, so instead, like I can look at this spot, I've learned now about this 9-7-4 button versus big blind 100 big steep, but what if I opened under the gun instead? How does this change things? What if I was only 30 big blinds? What if I was 40 big blinds? What if I was 40 big blinds and under the gun? And what if it was against the button instead? And you can play around with all of these different dynamics and then you can see how to kind of bucket the ideas together. So if 40 big blinds plays like 50 big blinds, then it's really easy for me to remember it. But suddenly if there's a big change when you get to 100 bigs, or if there's a big change when you get to 20 big blinds, then I need to make sure that I'm seeing what's different. And then once I can see the difference between 50 and 20 big blinds in this spot, I can apply it to other spots. Like I was saying, like maybe it's a 9-7-3 rainbow. I'm assuming going to be pretty much the same in how we play it. But if I don't think so, I can just check it, and I can actually directly see what are the differences, or is a 3 just interchangeable with a 4 here? What if it's like a 9-4-4 board, and then how much does that change across different pair boards? And you can explore obviously as many different flop textures, as many different stack depths, as many different position on positions, and just try and group the information together. If I try and quickly surmise this, I guess we learned that make sure you're always betting on the flop with like your pocket fours, with your ace-9, with your king-9. Make sure you're check raising your 6-8s and your 10-8s and your 6-5s. And you might have raised in this spot and thought, I've just always got it because I don't know which hands to bluff with here. You can now know, oh, I'm bluffing with these hands, so like, it doesn't matter if he thinks I've always got it. I don't. Like you don't need to actually worry about it because you know your range is protected. Or you can start to make the exploits and think like you've got a tight image in some live cash game, and you just throw out it's like way more of these raises for a bit until they get to showdown, and you're just exploiting everyone that thinks you've got the tight image. Poker is always about that back and forth of he knows that I know that he knows, and kind of calibrating, and eventually what we're looking at now is the equilibrium it's kind of supposed to get to, but we're very far from that. So you could continue and see like, oh, what if there's an ace turn, what do I do there? But again, the game tree is so complicated at that point that you don't want to go too far into a hand, because then it's already got to the turn in the solver way, and like I said, it's checked 40% of its range on the flop, and if we don't think people are checking 40%, then there's no point us trying to solve a game tree that doesn't exist in reality, because then we're playing against the solver and we don't play against solvers. I hope this was informative. This is how I'm studying right now. I'm trying to learn and relearn and reconsolidate why I bet with certain hands and which hands are the best bets, which hands are best to go into a bigger or a smaller size, or is this a spot I can bet my range? Is this a spot I can start check raising a lot more with hands that should only check raise sometimes? And you can just find all of the spots that you find yourself in a lot and really hammer home the reasons that you play the way you do, or learn it for the first time if you're just kind of winging it like most of us are in most spots. There's just so many spots in this game you have to learn about. I hope that was useful. That was ODIN. Go download it if you think it looks good. I'm sure there's other solvers that do similar things as well. This is just the one I'm using because it's got a lot of tournament stuff, and it's the one I happen to get. I don't know much about the others, to be honest. Yeah, like, comment, subscribe, do all the good stuff, and thanks for watching.